Why narcissists target people with autism. My name's Jared Mello, the wizard of radical self-respect and the shepherd of black sheep. Before I get into today's video, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video if you like it, and comment below your thoughts on what I have to say. Now, full disclosure, I am someone that is on the spectrum, probably level 1-ish. So what I'm about to say here is no shade on people with autism. And this is just my experience. Not everyone is going to have this experience. There's been some people telling me that, well, my kids, they can spot narcissists from a mile away, and they're on the spectrum. And I would say, that's awesome. But unfortunately for me, that was not my experience. I had to learn the hard way. And I think there's a lot of people that had to learn the hard way. But why? Why did we have to learn the hard way? Well, one reason is we were probably a little more awkward in social situations. We were not as socially calibrated. And this made it hard to be confident and to be assertive and to have strong boundaries. That's a big reason right there. Also, many of us have social anxiety, and this makes us appear more insecure. Even if we aren't insecure, when you have anxiety, that's just how it comes off. It comes off as people that are insecure. It is what it is. But that combination, I think narcissists can pick up on that. They're really good at picking up on vulnerabilities, and autistic people as well. They take things at face value. If someone says something, they can be a little naive, and they're just going to believe them because the person with autism is going to think, well, I wouldn't lie about this. I wouldn't be manipulative. I would be direct. So other people are going to be the same way I would be. But this is a fatal flaw for people with autism, because if they project those good qualities of theirs onto the narcissist, it can really backfire in their face. But the narcissist notices this. They notice that, yeah, this person might not be as socially calibrated and confident. And since the narcissist likes to be controlling and they can be bossy, they think they can really do that to the person with autism. They think, yeah, I can push around this person here. I can get them to do what I want them to do. And unfortunately, especially when the person with autism is younger, they're right. A lot of times they're right because the person with autism just doesn't know any better. They don't know. Now, a couple caveats here as well, though. Sometimes, if the person with autism has a narcissistic parent, well, now this narcissist comes in, and this seems familiar. It's like that expression, if home wasn't a safe place for you, be very careful with people that feel like home. Well, if you don't recognize it, though, you don't recognize that it's even unsafe, but it just feels normal, it's going to be normal, especially when you're younger, to gravitate towards those kinds of situations. That's just human nature. Another possibility is you have a parent that has undiagnosed autism. And if they have undiagnosed autism, they don't recognize it in themselves. And then they're going to be much less likely to recognize it in their kids as well. And this creates a cascading effect of issues, because if people don't know that this is one of your issues, people are not going to treat you as if you're autistic because they don't know. And so there's going to be a learning curve here that, unfortunately, you're going to learn the hard way. And also to note, like me, I didn't know I was on the spectrum. I didn't know until my 30s, I feel like, that it finally began to make sense. And I saw all of the symptoms, and people on my channel here even commented to me. They said, yeah, I think you're on the spectrum, and you might have some coping mechanisms that are pretty intense, but yeah, I think this is what's going on with you. And I finally looked into it because I had originally thought, no, people who are on the spectrum, they're nonverbal. So I never thought it could be me. I thought it was much worse. I didn't realize there were the levels. I didn't realize Asperger's, what that really looked like. And if I got diagnosed with something, that's what it would be, Asperger's, but they don't really have that diagnosis anymore. It's just included in the autism spectrum diagnosis. But back to the narcissist part. So narcissists, they notice this and they want to control and be bossy and bully the person with autism. Another thing that happens is autistic people can have meltdowns. And if a narcissist begins to pick up on this, oh, if I goad them, I trigger them or I try to get under their skin, the autistic person can have a meltdown. And that's when they kind of become emotionally volatile. They can get really angry, throw temper tantrums. And this can be really pleasing to the narcissist. And this used to happen to me about 15, 20 years ago. A narcissistic family member, they would love doing that to me. And I would lose it. And I still remember this vividly. They were smiling and laughing as I was losing it. To them, it was hysterical. They loved getting under my skin. But for me, I was super pissed. But they just didn't care. But back then, I think this was even happening in front of another family member. But they didn't notice it either. And I didn't notice it for what it was. But it was abuse is what it was. And I just didn't recognize it. But that was my normal. Back then, I didn't recognize narcissism. I didn't recognize my own issues either. So this person was loving making me have a meltdown. And they were getting a lot of sadistic glee. And they would have that narcissistic smirk that is super obnoxious. And this is the smirk that they get when maybe it's a duper's delight in a way where they get away with something devious, or they're enjoying pushing you off of your emotional center and getting under your skin. It gives them a dopamine rush and it gives them a sadistic sense of glee. But it's super obnoxious. But these are some of the reasons to me why a narcissist can target a person with autism, because they see them as an easy mark and they want to be able to control them. The autistic person is going to take more of what they say at face value and literally, and the narcissistic person can enjoy trying to make them have meltdowns. And it can take a while. It can take a while for the person with autism to kind of see what's going on here. Because in my experience, somebody with autism, they have a learning curve. Like, it takes a while for them to understand things. But here's the other thing. Once they understand, then they become unstoppable because they have really good skills at pattern recognition. And that's what it was like for me. Once I started to understand the behaviors of a narcissist, the behaviors of a psychopath, oh, now I see. And once I see, I can't unsee anymore. It's there, and I couldn't turn it off now, even if I wanted to. And I'm grateful for that now. I'm grateful that this is the ability that I have. And that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, for the people with autism, just learning that first time, learning what these patterns look like. And unfortunately, a lot of times this learning curve is going to be painful. But as in the other cases I've heard of, there are parents telling me, yeah, my kids can see through them a mile away. And again, to which I say, that is amazing. That was not my story, though. It was not my story because I had a parent that was either undiagnosed autistic or narcissistic or a combination of both. And that's another question I get too sometimes is, can a narcissistic person also be autistic? Or can an autistic person also be narcissistic? And the answer is yes, they can. So, and it can be tricky. It can be tricky because especially if it's comorbid, how do you know what's doing what? But the bottom line is the behaviors. The behaviors can be problematic either way sometimes. And there's different reasons for it too, but that's a different video. But I think when someone's on the spectrum, it can just take them a while. It can take them a while to learn social cues. It can take them a while to learn what is socially calibrated and to learn just the mechanics of language and the mechanics of being social and what's socially appropriate and what's not. And because of that learning curve, they can be taken advantage of along the way because it comes off as a vulnerability. And again, I don't necessarily see what I have now as a vulnerability, but again, I had a very painful learning curve, and I take a lot of supplements now that really help me. So if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be. And it's easy for me to say this now that I have a good routine. But when things were not going well for me, it was super painful because I was running to drugs. I was running to alcohol. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know why I had all this anxiety all the time. I just didn't get it. But there's a reason why I think I kept on attracting those kinds of people. And it's because when they would come at me, I wouldn't stand up to them. I wouldn't stand up to them and be assertive. I wouldn't stand up to them and tell them no. And I wouldn't call out their disrespect. I wouldn't place boundaries. And that combination of things made me an easy mark. And again, should they be doing that? Of course not. Narcissists should not be doing that. But it's in their nature to do so, unfortunately. And considering that, if you have a child with autism, hopefully teaching them what the behaviors of a narcissist are like, and then helping them to be assertive and tell them how to say no, to call out disrespect, and to not put up with it, and to show them what unacceptable behavior is, what disrespect looks like, etc. That's super important. And those are the things I just never learned. And I learned it the hard way. But even though I learned it the hard way, I think since I learned it the hard way, I was able to understand in a way that helps me explain it better to others, if that makes sense. If I didn't go through it the hard way, I wouldn't know what I know now. Because when you have to learn things the hard way, you really dive deep into trying to understand yourself and understanding the issues. And I've done this in many areas of life, honestly. In many areas, I've had to really try, okay, how do I understand this? Because I was struggling. And when you're struggling, you really have a motivation to try to get better. And I think a lot of helpers, this is their story. They were struggling with something on their own. And in the process of trying to get better, they really learn a lot about subjects. It's one of the major reasons I know so much about narcissism is I was surrounded by them and I just didn't know it. And I didn't know it. And part of the reason I was surrounded, besides the fact they were in my family, is I think I was also being targeted because I was on the spectrum. And a funny story about it, which isn't really that funny, but there was a woman that I would consider narcissistic years ago. She was telling me that her husband was Asperger's. They would consider this the autistic spectrum now too. And I remember listening to it, and I didn't realize that was me. I was also that. I just didn't know it. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, this woman's really out of control how could she ever be dating someone with Asperger's? Because I thought Asperger's was so much worse in my mind for some reason. I thought it was like a really bad condition. And again, I didn't know it was me. But here I am now looking back on it. I'm like, wow, there's a reason why this person who was into me, that's probably part of the reason. They sensed that, oh, this guy is not going to push back as much. This guy's not going to be assertive. This guy can be a little bit more of a pushover. And again, this is just my story with it. There are different kinds, or there's different levels of severity to autism, and it can look different in each individual person. So I don't want to exclaim that my experience with this is going to be everyone's experience. It's not. This is just my experience, and if you can relate to it, great. But if it's not your experience, okay, I totally get there's other kinds of experiences out there. And I totally get there are some people on the spectrum that can see through a narcissist's behaviors from a mile away. And then if that's the case, then great. But if it's not, and you can relate to what I'm saying, I understand. I understand, and it was very painful, but it was that combination. The combination of not being assertive, not being confident, having those meltdowns, trying to see the best in people, being a little bit naive. That's really what made me more of a target. But awareness of this is more than half the battle. A lot of people ask me, what did we do? What did we do? How did we get better? And I always say, just the fact that you have awareness of some of that stuff is more than 50% of the battle. So give yourself credit if that's you. But that's my experience with why I think I was targeted by narcissistic people. But now I've armored myself. I know all about narcissism. I have a supplement routine that really helps me to be more confident and assertive and to be able to say no and to look people in the eye. I mean, those are things that I really struggled with. There was something, and I know now, since autism affects the GABA system, there's something with the GABA system that it just made it really difficult for me. I couldn't say no. I couldn't be assertive and take charge and look someone in the eye and tell them no. It just was really difficult. It's very hard to explain why, but it just was. There was something really uncomfortable about it. And the only way I can try to describe it is, if you ever had been on benzodiazepines and you're on a benzodiazepine withdrawal, the anxiety I felt on a day-to-day basis is similar to that. It's similar to a very low dose benzodiazepine withdrawal. And it's only like that in front of others, though. Like when you're by yourself, you don't feel that. You feel more comfortable in solitude. But around people, that level of anxiety would just be like hideous. And if I look back at some of my journals in my like lower 20s, mid 20s, I would write about it. I would write about all of this anxiety that I was feeling, and it was atrocious. And I was like, why am I feeling this? Because I stopped drugs, I stopped drinking, I stopped caffeine, I stopped cigarettes, and I still had this anxiety. It's like, what the heck is going on here? And that's when I finally started the supplement routine. And it wasn't until later into my supplement routine that I discovered, oh, it's from being on the spectrum. But at least by that point, a lot of that anxiety was curbed. And for the most part, I'm pretty good with it now. And I'm sure there's some signs and symptoms of me being on the spectrum still. Like people will call out my blinking sometimes, and that's also a neurodivergent thing as well. But it is what it is. And it was a painful process for me, but I also wouldn't exchange it for the world. It made me who I am today. And if you like who you are today, and I do like and love who I am today, because, and in no small part, because I have a routine also, that I can't deny, that absolutely contributes. But I'm grateful for the process. I'm grateful for how I got here. And hopefully you've been able to learn something from this video, or if you're on the spectrum yourself, maybe you can relate to what I had to say. And no, it does get better. There are things that you can do to improve it. Learning about narcissism is one of them. Sometimes developing a supplement routine, that's another thing too. Again, whatever works for you. I don't try to shove my method down other people's throats. No, whatever works for you. I can tell you what works for me. And then if you want to try some of that, you can. Like I said, I used to talk more about supplements on this channel too, but I don't as much anymore. Maybe I will start again, but we'll see. But I think that's a good place to end this video here. I think hopefully people relate to what I had to say about this. They can relate to the story, or maybe even better, you were able to see through narcissist behavior from the beginning and you didn't have to go through the same things I did. That's great too. But again, if you got this far, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, and comment below what your experience is with this. Are you a person on the spectrum that was targeted by narcissists? Are you a person on the spectrum that was able to see through them right away? Either way, I would love to hear what you have to say. But again, thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.